Welcome everyone to the 2021 Right Hive Editing Graphic Novels panel. We have a bunch of amazing guests here. We have John Kimpson, Michael Scott, Brian Lambert, and Shannon Watters, a really amazing amalgamation of talents here from a wide array of editing backgrounds. And I'm really excited for all the perspectives you guys are going to bring to this conversation. So I guess to start things off, let's just kind of talk about how you entered the world of editing graphic novels, because it's a little less of a straightforward path than editing prose. So whoever wants to take that first, then we'll go around.
I'll go first. I guess for for me and then for us as Thingamajig Studios, when we started, we kind of got into everything we did. We kind of did out of necessity. Started our company, started doing comic books. We started off as a different company at one point and had some traction and some books, and then started having to source out different things and looking and like, why are we paying this guy or this person for this and that, and looking at the work they were doing, and started looking at editing and seeing how it was and what we were doing. And I'm like, you know what, I think we can kind of do this and figure out the flow, and had some hits and some misses and all that stuff, but most of it was done out of necessity, at least from our standpoint, how we got into it and why we're continuing to do it, especially with COVID and not being able to see and meet people. You kind of take on more hats and more jobs than you do, and then you realize that you're not too bad at it.
Nice.
I think for me, I had to do editing because I realized what I did with my first novel. And I did have an editor, but it wasn't one I really trusted. And I saw the difference in how the trust in an editor really makes a difference in the final product. So I kind of wanted to be that person for other people. And I got a really great opportunity with Greg Anderson Elise, who does It's Not in the Were Spider. And he had just asked me one time, like, hey, man, you want to read this script? And I was like, but how about you let me edit it, give me the credit for it, and then that'll kind of launch me where I want to go. And after that, it just kind of worked, because I think that a lot of times, especially in indies and stuff, people will kind of skimp on the money portion, which means something gets cut, and 9 times out of 10 it's editing, and that becomes real evident. And I wanted to make sure that, like, for myself and my company, and at least the people like in my circle, like, that wasn't, if we had any issues, I didn't want that to be one of them.
Shannon?
Oh, sure. I got into comic book editing because I kind of like came back. I was a big like newspaper comics and animation fan when I was a kid, and I like came back to American comic books when I was probably in like 8th grade or something. It was in 1999, and or I guess a freshman in high school, and I read a comic called Blue Monday, which was being published by Oni Press at the time. And it was kind of this manga-ish, John Hughesian teen comedy. And I loved it, and it got me into everything else that they were doing at that point. And I realized that all of my favorite books from them had the same editor. Because in Blue Monday, the creator, China Clugston, would do shout outs to her editor, like, her editor admonishing her for being late, and I was like, oh, this guy he's the one who kind of like curates all of this stuff. And I loved editing. I was like a yearbook editor, when I was a kid. And so I was like, comic book editing, yeah, that would be a cool thing to do. And then obviously, like, you go, oh, that's never ever going to happen in a million years. And I had a job when I got out of school that I really hated. So I started applying for a lot of jobs. And I ended up coming across a copy editing job at Tokyo Pop, which was a manga publisher that is long. The ship has long sailed on Tokyo Pop. I think it's still around a little bit, but it was my foot in the door. I was a copy editor there in 2007, 2008. And I got recommended for an assistant editor job at Boom coming out of that a few years later. That's how I did it. Like, it was like total, like like some folks will say like breaking into comics is like breaking out of jail, because as soon as you find the route out, they fill it in, and somebody else has to get in a different way. So
yeah, it definitely seems like a not normalized, there's no standardized route into getting into comics or graphic novels.
No.
Yeah, to piggyback off of Mike, because we both in the same company, there's three of us.
Right.
So like you said, we had to do it ourselves. And what's good about it is three of us, so we can all keep each other in check and make sure the story flows and makes sense and the panels match. So that's how we got into editing.
Yeah, that's something I really love about being an editor. There's much more of that collaborative aspect than there is when you're just being a writer. Because when you're just a writer, you're alone, you're putting the words down, you're kind of getting through it. And then when you're an editor, there inherently is that part of like, oh, we're making something together here, which is really cool. So yeah, so like we were saying, when many people think about editing, they think of the traditional prose editor as opposed to a graphic novel editor, because when you get to graphic novels and comics, there's a whole bunch of stages of development for a graphic novel as opposed to a prose novel. At what phase of that process do you all come in, and what does that kind of look like for you?
I personally, dude, I'm editing from like day one. Like, I want to know what your synopsis is. I want to know like if we're going the right way, because I mean, I think it's a lot better if someone pitches you a story and it doesn't make sense, even in the synopsis, and you can be like, that doesn't make sense. You can stop right there, so that creatives, we're all really feelingsy people. Like, we care so much about what we do, and we're so attached to it. So it's better to kind of get in front of what's going to have to happen earlier. So for me, from the jump, I'm editing, and comic book and graphic novel editing is much different in that you can't just look at the words. Like, you have to know the panel layouts, and you have to have that very cinematic kind of view, even if you're reading the script. Like, this panel makes sense or this panel doesn't make sense. And then you get the illustrator in there. And I know personally I had this issue. I don't want to call it an issue, but it was an oversight where my illustrator would have, like, my main character would be on the left in 4 panels. And then on the 5th one, he would be on the right. And it just didn't make sense, right? And it might be like the most dynamic pose of the entire setup, but it's like, you got to flip it, you know what I mean? And those kinds of things for flow. So, and then you get the next step of when you're editing graphic novels, letters. That's not something that you necessarily have to worry about in other genres, but you have to worry about letters. Does that wham look as good as it should? Like, is it in the right place? Is it not? Does it flow? Are the bubbles too close to the lettering? Like, small things that are just really, really important and change the entire dynamic of the product that you're producing. So for me, again, I jump in as early as I can, and not to like control, but to have my hands. I feel like as an editor, you're more guiding what should happen. There are some writers that are like, oh, my editor sucked, that's why this story sucked. And it's like, nah, your story sucked because you like the story sucked. But the editor, you know what I mean, should be in there. It shouldn't suck because the editor should have guided you from the beginning of like, this kind of sucks, maybe we don't do this, you know what I mean? And that's the I feel like the editor is the most like a cinematic director in this form.
I often, when people ask me, I compare it to like producing comic book editing. Like, comics and graphic novels, because it's such a visual medium and you're involved in literally every step from the moment that you pick that story up. I always am like, oh, it's more like a producer, because sometimes I'm casting, sometimes I'm, and so I'm like hiring creators to help bring a story to life. You're literally, like you said, like sitting down, developing the story, developing the pitch. So yeah, it's more like a producer than I think a prose editor, where you're receiving a finished piece of work.
That makes total sense. Michael, John, what about you guys?
Well, yeah, I think the editor's job
I was
is
gonna kind of agree with.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, John.
I was just saying that.
Okay, I was.
I knew that was going to happen.
What I was going to say was that, yeah, the editor's job is to kind of help you make your book look good. Make sure you don't have the mistakes. Make sure, like, if you write something,
and it don't need to be written because the scene already explains it. So you want your stuff to flow, look good, and not like you're double doing the work. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I'm like Brian. I like getting in as early as I can. I kind of have a on my board, okay, like that synopsis. And for me, I'm always like, what's that end point? At the end of this story or at the end of this book, what is it that you want? What are your key points that you want to hit? And then to me, as an editor, we're trying to kind of steer that ship and make sure we hit those things that you want. And how does that book flow? I'm one of the things that to me is lettering. Sometimes to me, the lettering can, really detract from the book if you have it in the wrong place, or if it's taken away from the scene, or you have a scene that's crucial and you don't need the words, but the lettering doesn't fit. So, I mean, that's to me, lettering. So, what the thing about the editor is, you get all of the blame, but none of the accolades. If the book's a hit,
Absolutely.
the artist,
Yeah.
the writer, and all that stuff. And then if it sucks, oh well, it was my editor, or no, So it is what it is. But I do like to get on as soon as I can to try to steer the book in to make that vision that the writer and the artist have. I try to make sure they realize that vision, whatever that vision is. But getting in as early as you can helps you do that. And sometimes, you bump heads with some people trying to get them to understand, or hey, it's gonna flow better this way, or trust me, I've done this before. So, the earlier is always better.
I also think that well, like an industry thing, right? Like, so your audience will forgive you for typos, but they won't forgive you for editing mistakes. And sometimes they don't even realize that that's why they don't like a book or whatever's going on. Because like you said, getting editing props, that's like an industry thing more than anything. Like if you're a horrible editor or the edits are bad, like the people in the industry are going to be like, they know immediately. They're not going to say it like that maybe, but they know what it is and you know what they're saying. But like to the public at large and to your audience, they're just going to be like, oh, the writer messed up, so it really is like that duality of having those two, aspects in there of what you're showing your audience and making sure that it's there for them as an editor and being kind of that silent partner to the public. But again, the industry knows like, oh man, they just did a kick-ass job.
That actually leads pretty well into the next question that I was going to ask you guys. I think is really, you were kind of just talking about how there are things that you see that an editor does very well, that that it's an editorial thing once you kind of know the nuts and bolts of how a story is made. When you're looking at a story, when you're working with a writer, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you recognize that are like, that is an editorial mistake. This is something that we need to fix, or things that are really good that you notice that editors do, like an editorial signature about how they make the story go?
I'd say one thing, mistake is like you want the artist or the story to make it consistent. Like I've seen some art where the character looks one way on one page, and then you get 2 pages down, it got a different face, or you don't recognize the character. So you have to make sure that the artwork is consistent as well as the story.
And I will often kind of, if you have like a great letterer, then the letterer almost becomes invisible, right? Like you're flowing through the comics so kind of artfully that you don't realize you're being carried there by a really good letterer. And I often feel like a great editor is similar. If you are like a truly great editor, it's almost like the body of work speaks for you, as opposed like the body of the work that you've edited speaks for you, as opposed to kind of like the like small individual things. I will often like see a body of work and go, oh, like this person has a great eye for editorial, because that's a huge part of it, right? But in the actual work, if a story is flowing smoothly and working beautifully, then the editorial hand is the invisible one, right? It's the one that's kind of pushing you along, but you don't see it. Yeah.
A really thankless job being an editor.
It's great though.
Right? It is super awesome though.
Yeah.
I think one of the a lack of editing, like a mistake that I see a lot is people always have a statement they want to make. And I can immediately tell when someone is potentially making the wrong statement. I feel like every writer, myself included, at some point in their life writes a story where they're the hero and like they have all the cool stuff and like they have a cool car and all this stuff, but you're still supposed to like connect with them because they're still downtrodden. Somehow they're still like the person down on their luck or whatever, you know, the plucky person you're supposed to root for, but you have no reason to root for them. Because they want to make a statement, and that's a statement about however they felt in life, or you know, when they felt picked on and on and on and on. And without an editor, you get that horrible story where it is that, and you don't connect with the hero. With an editor, you get that story that actually makes sense, where, oh man, this person didn't have everything going for her. This is the true, you know, this is what you really wanted to tell. And I think sometimes, most times, with a good editor, you get to peel back those layers and get to the actual statement people want to make, because everything you write is a statement about something. Sometimes people just don't know what their statement is. They know they've got some angst, they know they've got something. And the editor has the ability to just worry about story. They don't have to have any emotional connection originally. Like they're going to connect with the story once they start reading it, but it's not coming from their heart. They're not spitting out that teen angst. They're not spitting out, you know, the girl who broke up with them. They see like, oh man, this guy got his heart broken, so let's tell the best story about him getting his heart broken, as opposed to like, I was super cool and she broke my heart, you know. And I think that is like an awesome a piece of editing, because you can take it's like Gumby, man. Like he was once like a little ball of clay, and you make him into like this really dope piece that becomes iconic when done correctly.
I love that.
Yeah, I
It
think
just shows I'm a really, really big nerd.
A Gumby reference is a deep cut.
Aren't
You
we
really
all?
Right? It's real niche. I was going for that.
Are there any graphic novels or editors that you guys can think of that really stand out, that you can see their editorial signature? Like the first one that always comes to my mind, which is just like a huge one, probably the most cliche, when you first think of editors getting into graphic novels, like Karen Berger. Like you're just like, ah, yes, Karen Berger's style, what she does. Is there anyone for you guys that kind of does that for you?
I will often say like that Callista Brill over at First Second like got to, like, when I was in college, I used to read webcomics a lot, and I would be like, oh, like if I were doing comics, I would do comics with like Vera Broskel and Jen Wang and that crew of people. And of course, like they're killing it over at First Second. But I will often, you know, a First Second book has a very particular point of view, I would say.
Yeah.
I had somebody in mind, and then I guess that's the case of the 52. Now 52 years old, because I'm like, I can't even think of the book. Like, I was just looking at it, and come back to me. I'm gonna try to remember it, because that's bugging me now that I forgot it. I can't believe it.
The only person I can think of, like growing up, was Stan Lee.
Yeah.
A classic. You can't go wrong with a classic.
Right.
I remember Greg Rucka edited a comic, and it was like, I don't even remember what book it was, but like for me, I think that was like the first time I saw an editor. And I honestly don't even remember if it was like a particularly good editing job, but it was like the one name that stuck with me as a kid. Like, wait a minute. Wait, they do this? Like, it's not just a dude who just sits around drawing. He draws them, you know what I mean? When you were young, well, when I was young anyway, I didn't think it was like an entire team. And he's like one of the first ones that I can remember saying like, oh, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people that put this book together, as opposed to like, you know, you read a Bill Watterson comic, you know, a little Calvin and Hobbes strip, it's Bill Watterson. Now he have an editor that somebody compiles the book way later, yeah, but like it's Bill Watterson, and that's what I like started with. And then you get into comics and it's like, oh, Greg Rucka, oh man, he must be so dope. And I had no idea what he did at the time, but I was like, man, that's so cool.
I love Michael, if you got it now. We'll come back.
No,
We'll circle back.
now I'm looking it up on my phone, because I'm trying to remember, like, what is this? Messing with me, and I'm feel so bad. I'm sitting here now. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Good. We'll circle back around.
Yes, yes, because I'm gonna get you that answer before we get off this thing. I want you to know.
It's funny, Greg Rucka was like, because I was reading Oni, like when I first kind of got back into American comics, it was like Whiteout, like Greg Rucka's book, and his wife Jen Van Meter, who did a book called Hopeless Savages. That was like, oh my god, blow my mind. It's very similar, Greg, being in my kind of like, oh my gosh, editing comics, this is a real thing.
Right, yeah. I think so at the risk of creating some enemies, I think Lynn Barley as well. She sticks out in my brain, but like for both the good and the bad, honestly. I think what the work she did on Dark Knight was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then I think the work that she did on Dark Knight Strikes Back was not so amazing. Like, so it's like, I mean, I get it. Sometimes you got to roll with your team, but I feel like they could have just not done that. And I'd still be alive right now. I think it'd be okay.
Gary Carlson.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm like, I was a huge Supreme from Image Days and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle guy, and that's what those two books were so different as far as the look, the aesthetic look. Supreme was your typical muscle bound guy in spandex, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the stories. But to me, the theme about them was, these guys are trying to save people, and people are looking at them, and they're not human in the shadows. And Supreme is super guy, but the stuff behind it, all like that editing, and in fact, that's what made me read Supreme, because Gary Carlson was the editor on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it made me look at some of his things as I started to branch out and not pay more attention to as a kid, you see the art on the cover, and that draws your attention. And as you start getting into stories and how the flows in the book, and the art becomes less important. And that's what made me start looking into editing and finding out more about everything about the comic book.
Nice. So,
there it is. I know I was gonna have that answer. It was bugging me until I got it.
Well, perfect timing, because this question is going to be a little heavier, and I want to know. I'm excited to hear your guys' answers for it, because I think it's going to be a great conversation. The culture of comics and graphic novels has shifted drastically from the days of Stan Lee, and even from the days of like the 90s and early 2000s. And especially in the last 5 years, with this huge kind of resurgence of comics and graphic novels in popular culture. Alongside that has been a real focus on making sure we do inclusive and representative stories, because that is what is needed in this world. So long, kind of comics were very, very heterogeneous, straight white men making all the comics, and that was all it was. Right. And so how do we as editors play a role into that? What is our responsibility to include and represent people properly, but also prevent harmful representation when you're working with a writer and also an artist, because this is a visual medium as well?
I think we have an enormous responsibility to do that. We're both the first line and last line of defense, right? Like, we're often the people that are hiring the team or bringing in the projects. We are the ones that are shepherding the project and supervising the project. I think that like is an incredibly important and vital responsibility to be active in, and not just kind of passively go like, oh well, we'll figure it out. Like, you have to like take a stand and actively seek out expanding the comics industry, basically.
I also think just the fact, looking at this panel, a female and some people of color, just sometimes your presence, because it wasn't just on the cover and the people that were writing it, but the entire comic book industry has been that misogynist, whitewashed kind of world. So just by having more diversity with editors, that in itself kind of lends to people coming with that different perspective. You have that female editor, and it's, let's say it's the Avengers or whatever, it's a Captain America book, but you have that female editor who now can bring that different perspective into it. So I think just the fact that we have diversity in editors kind of also helps when you're looking for that talent. If you're looking for that artist, you're looking for that thing, you know, hey, you may give that female or that person of color, maybe even from another country, that chance to do something because you're looking at it from a different perspective. So I think we as editors have a really strong role in it. Again, like the unsung hero. You don't really see about it, you don't hear about it, but I think it's very integral in what we do.
I also think that I think it's very, very easy to spot when someone's going down the wrong path. I read a comic book a few years back from a certain group, and it had a Black character punching somebody with the fury of 1,000 slaves. And I nearly lost my mind, right? Because you know that the editor wanted that. That was what the editor chose that. You see that coming across and you know that's offensive. You know that's going to ruffle some feathers and you don't want to do anything. So it's very easy to pick out the parts where someone's stepping over a line. You just have to draw that line within yourself. You've got to have principle. And I think one of the most important things for an editor to have is principle. Because our job isn't really rhetorical. We really have to get in there and say, this is good or this is not good. Our job really isn't to, in certain aspects, it's other people's jobs to like baby the team. But after like we've gathered the team, it's not our job to baby them anymore. It's like, nah, dude, that panel didn't look right. Go back and draw it again. You know, that sentence doesn't make sense. Go back and do it again. You know, those letters are off. That's our entire job. I think the more difficult part sometimes is making sure that the representation is there, because you'll have writers or companies or conglomerates, corporations, whatever, that want to make one character everything. Oh, we have one character and that's our Black, Latino, half Irish, non-binary. And you're like, there's 19 things. They're going to be all the things. And then you have the audience, and I mean the audience of haters, right? That is going to say, oh, they made this character, it's pandering. No one says to Coca-Cola that vanilla Coke is pandering to all the people who like vanilla. No one, right? But if you do that and you, wait a minute, you've got two female heroes that are in love, you're pandering. No. We're marketing to an audience that needs that representation. But again, people don't look at it like that. Like the hater side of it, obviously they don't. And it becomes the editor's job to really make that, make it known and make it seen. I know there was a, I was watching what was it? It wasn't the Young Justice cartoon. Now I thought first season 1, season 2 were great. Season 3, okay, kind of. In season 4, again, you got a character that's 4 and 5 things, you know, non-binary, poly, and I want all of that representation. But when you try to shove all of that into one character, just so you can say, we have this representation, that's cheap. It cheapens that movement. It cheapens those people. And so I think it's on the editor to say like, no, man, Beast Boy can be, you know, poly, and this person is, you know what I mean? And so it's on the editor. The editor's job is to make the story more believable, to make it flow better, to make it more realistic. So that goes across the board, and that's the way it should happen. So then it's not, you know, pandering or whatever. It's not just we threw that one character in there. No, you've created a cast of people that reflect life, and that like really is our job, because we're creating books that reflect the art that we want, which art is life, you know, blah, 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 blah. So then we should be doing the same. And it is more difficult, but it's also far more rewarding, I believe.
My favorite part, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The piggyback on that was saying that, you know, help as an editor, you also do research on cultures. So you're not representing them in the book. And that's one of the things we try to do. I think with the studio, our books want to be diversity, where when you go outside, you see every race. You don't just see one race. You're dealing with different people, different personalities, and you want to look at those people as humans and not as a color.
Absolutely.
I always find it so funny, like you said, when they stick kind of like one character in there who's everything, and then they're hanging out with like a bunch of straight white people. And I'm like, I know very few straight people. As a gay lady, I'm always like, oh, that was fascinating. You know, it's like, what are you talking about? Anyway, I always
Yeah,
thought
no, like all of my friends are multiple things, but they're
Yes.
all multiple things.
exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have to have like when you do the multiple choice A, B, C, or D, all of the above. Just check
Yeah.
D,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, we filled our quota, we're good.
That's something I think that's actually really interesting. That is a whole big part of the conversation, the idea of a quota and the idea that like, oh, this one person, this one character is everything. We've reached our quota, which is definitely a bigger issue on the side of publishing, which is made up of people, but still the publishing institution rather than individual creators. And the more individual creators are conscious of this, then it trickles into the institutions rather than going from the top down.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I think that's all really valid. Have you ever had to have a difficult discussion with a creator, and how did you navigate that? Because that's something I think is oh, well, it seems like we have a story based on that laugh.
You're
Well-
asking us to tell
No names, no names. Just like possibly some advice for some individuals who, because I know we're creators and a lot of us are introverts, so having those difficult conversations can sometimes be hard. Possibly some nameless stories of how you navigated that.
I navigate them, I guess. I mean, I guess now pretty well. Previously, like the previous year, pretty horribly. They call me the Suge Knight of indie comics because I'm just like, no, it sucks. Don't do that. That's stupid.
Oh yeah.
I worked for a company at one point, and they were going to release a comic, and it was a really, really great picture. Like the view was, guy sitting on the moon. There's an asteroid heading towards Earth, and like he waits till the last second. Like there's a countdown on his watch. He waits till 3 seconds, and then he goes and destroys the meteor and saves Earth. And they were like, "Oh man, it's the coolest shit ever." And I was like, "No, that guy's an asshole. Like, why? What? Oh, do you know how many space debris are gonna hit the Earth? And blah blah blah." And then okay, the next idea. Well, this guy, he can control the sun and move the sun. He's so powerful he can move the sun closer to Earth. And I was like, so he's just gonna kill everybody. So everybody dies because he moves the sun 3 inches, right? And so I'm that guy, and I did it like so bluntly so many times because to me, like John said, like you do just like a little bit of research. Like you don't even have to go far. Like hit the Wikipedia and find out if the science you're talking about actually even makes sense or you should do it. So I mean, I had a couple instances where, oh well, he's gonna do this and his cloak comes alive, and I was like, so you mean Spawn? No, it's not Spawn. It's different because he doesn't. And I was like, but it's like exactly what he died. Spawn died. He came back. Spawn came back. He took over heaven. I was like, dude. And that was the thing. So I've learned to kind of massage the ideas out now. Like, is that the best idea, or did they do that before? And so we should do something cooler on the other side. Because people at the end of the day, especially in comics, they really just want their stuff to be cool. They want that same feeling that they felt when they read comics. So if you give them alternatives, I've learned if I give them alternatives, or I say, hey, it doesn't work because of this. Like literally, if you destroy a meteor a second away from impacting Earth, it's still going to kill everybody on Earth. So like, it's not as cool as you think it is. Like I get visually what you're going for, but make it 30 minutes to impact as opposed to like 2 seconds. And that has helped me grow as an editor and help the projects that I'm currently involved with grow.
Nice. Yeah, definitely meeting people where they're at. Sorry, Michael.
It's funny from my perspective. That's okay. It took me 10 years to learn what Brian just said. I am also that. They always joke, you don't have to wonder what's on my mind. I'm gonna tell you whether you want to know or not. So, and having to understand that dealing with someone who's writing a story that's like their baby, and that's like coming up to somebody and telling them that their kid's ugly. And I had to learn, hey, like Ryan says, well, you know what? So you think maybe the story might go better this way, or you think, well, how about this? Or send them something, an article or something. Hey, check this out. This is kind of what your thing was talking about, and hopefully nudge them in that area. I've kind of made some had some jobs that I didn't have anymore because of my bluntness. And
I can attest to
learn
Michael's
how to temper
bluntness.
that.
I've been to cons with Michael. I know he's blunt. Yes, it's true. 100% true. Great guy. 100% true.
But I do think there's a lot of merit in that. Like giving it to people straight, I think is really important, and not like you said, there's some massaging because you're dealing with their babies, but I also don't think you're doing them a service if you kind of like pander to their worst tendencies, if you will. Like I think,
Sometimes the message gets lost in the translation.
Exactly.
If I say, hey, watch out, a car's coming. Hey, you dummy, you don't see that car coming, you dumb idiot. I'm saying the same thing, but how I'm delivering it.
Exactly.
That's what Michael has worked on Michael to make sure that we massage that.
We love it. We love self-growth.
Yeah. I'm a work in progress, and I understand that. So
my thing is that we had experience with an artist where we gave him a test page, and they did the test page. It looked great, but then when they started doing the book, I don't know what happened. The art went south.
It's the nightmare.
So it was just you try to be nice, but at the end of the day, we are here to make money, and that's not going to sell. And you had to say the nice way that your service is no longer needed. You just sometimes in that you got to make that tough call.
I want to go on record to say it wasn't me that told him that.
Well, I think we have time for one last question. And I think this will be really good. I think we've gotten a lot of great advice, a lot of great notes in this conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to all of you. It's been fantastic. So for someone who is just entering their career, kind of going into writing or editing graphic novels, we kind of talked about before how there's no one true path, but you're all now there on the other side to some degree. So do you have any advice for individuals who are looking to kind of possibly follow in the footsteps that have already been covered up?
Don't copy people. Now, and I know that we're talking about following in footsteps. So I don't mean like the nuts and bolts of like the business part of it. Copy everybody as far as business goes. Go to a convention, see your favorite booth, watch them for 3 hours, see what they do, come back the next year and copy them. Again, like I said, I know Thingamajig Studios. I was there in 2019 at Black Comics Day, and I watched how they worked. I watched how Keith and Jones worked. I watched how 133R, all those guys. And then I came back in 2020, last time it was on, and I paneled my own, I had my own booth then, and there were people like, oh, you've been doing this for years. And I was like, yeah, of course. No, it wasn't. It was like the first time I'd ever done it, but I pretended really well. So copy business and marketing strategies. Copy how people do their resumes. Copy when you see someone submit to a company or whatever, or see open submissions. Copy that stuff. What you shouldn't copy, and what happens all the time in indie comics, stop copying stories. If you have a guy who's Superman level power and he has split personalities, you're not original. That's called the Sentry. Like, if you have a guy who was, he was in a coma for 30 years and he came back and now he's shell-shocked, bro, that's Captain America. Like, stop copying. I know that we all want a Superman, but like, there's so many aspects of Superman or the Superman archetype that are amazing. Don't just do, he was from a small town, he's an alien, and he can bullets bounce off and he's got 19 powers. No, make interesting characters. You, as a human being, are an interesting person. People like you. I don't know how many, I don't know from where, but they do. Like, you have friends. You have people that admire you. Your characters should reflect that. They don't have to be the jock. Trust me, if you don't know this, the jock doesn't last. Even the NFL jocks don't last. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they top out at 30, 35. You got Brady. He don't count. You know what I mean? But like, they all top out. So focus on what makes you and your character special. Don't copy Marvel. Don't copy Image. And that's not to say you can't do superheroes. I'm wearing superheroes. Like, I do superheroes, but they're done differently. Don't just regurgitate what you read. Write what gives you the feeling that you had when you read it. And then that's going to translate to other people. Write something true to you, true to your experience, true to the statement you want to make, and everything will be fine. You will get to where you want to be, but you're not going to get to where you want to be if you do the copy thing. You're going to think it's, oh man, it's great. I don't know why people don't like it, because it's a copy, because they've already seen it. They don't need another Goku. They got Goku. You create something different.
From a writer standpoint, I always tell people to, number one, write with no fear, but write what you don't see. Like he just said, like Brian just said, there's a bunch of Supermen. There's all these different things, but what is it that you don't see? Write about the thing that you've never seen before. To me, that's where you create that niche that you're doing. And now it's more so you have that Superman character, but I've never seen Superman like this. Okay, let me write that. Do your research before, go and look and see, because there's a lot of stuff out here, especially with the internet. You can go and look, but write what you don't see. And then usually if you do that and you write without fear, you just put those things down, and when you bring it to somebody, that's where that good editor is going to come in and be able to coalesce all those ideas and maybe streamline it and get it in there. But write what you don't see, and that's what I always tell people when they're trying to get into the industry, especially as writers.
I always advise writers to finish things, like write. Well, no, like, because I think a lot of writers will go like, okay, here I go. It's my first thing, and it's going to be 1,000 pages long. All right, here's my opus, blam. And it's like, maybe just like write a little 5-page mini comic first, my man, and like finish it, because it feels really good to finish things. It feels really good, and it's I think it's better for you as a writer to kind of learn how structure and stuff works in these smaller doses, where you don't become overwhelmed by this massive thing that you've started. Like, do a couple of 1-page comics, 2-page comics, 10-page comics, like finish some things. It feels good, and it is good for you as a writer to learn how to finish things, to learn how to let things go, and not just spend like 10 years wrestling with something when you've never finished anything. So
and also edit, think outside the box and don't be afraid to fail. Everybody fails. Is how you get back up and get back in there.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This was amazing. I really, really enjoyed it, and I know our audience did as well. So enjoy the rest of the con, and see everyone on the Discord.
All right. Have a good one.